When she was a girl, my mother wanted passionately to read a book called Woman Doctor, but she never did. For reasons lost to history, her mother had issued an ironclad ban on Woman Doctor. What this meant to me was that years later, when I was a child, my mother swore never to censor my reading. Even as a girl, I was a little skeptical of this supposed non-interference plan, which went against everything I knew of my parents. But I had to give my mom credit. She seemed genuinely committed to this ideal. Around the time I was 11 or 12, my mother's reading and mine had begun to converge, with the occasional wholesome crossover book about veterinarians or emergency doctors. Jean M. Auel's The Clan of the Cave Bear was initially one of these bridges. The heroine of Auel's series is Isla. After being orphaned in an earthquake, Isla is raised by a Neanderthal clan. Her life with them is book one of the series, and it was over this volume that my mother and I bonded. So anthropological, so well-researched, so purely educational. There were sex scenes, but they were more mating than lust. That changes in the second and third books, when Isla encounters her soulmate, John Delar, and together the two become a sort of homecoming king and queen for the Cro-Magnon set. But a visit to a new tribe soon leads to complications. There's a lot about how the Mammoth tribe are a matriarchy and a feminist wonderland, but I was 12, and I didn't give a damn about prehistoric female political power. I was far more intrigued by Isla's romps with John Delar, and later, his competition, Rannoch. The novel earnestly asserts that every time someone shares pleasures in the sleeping furs, they honor the Great Mother. The Great Mother and all of her oversized members and deep wells of womanhood is honored frequently and ecstatically. Not terribly experimentally, but nothing to shake a stick at either. The novel's vision of the ancient attitude towards sex is open, jocular, yet respectful, shall we say, earthy. I read this book, which my mother had thoughtfully purchased in hardcover, several dozen times or so in one summer. I preferred not to read it out in the open where my parents might walk by as I lingered over a particularly honey-soaked passage. Yet even as I devoured these books, I had a hard time reconciling myself to the idea that my own mother had suggested them. Not tacitly allowed it, but specifically encouraged them. This possibility threw everything off balance. Had she only skimmed these books? In her defense, my mother didn't possess my unerring instinct for ferreting out sexual description, so perhaps she'd missed something. Perhaps she was so busy and distracted by grad school and work that she read right over the 3- and 4-page altercations that enthralled me. But there was another possibility as well. Still drunk on matriarchy and the ancient frankness about pleasures, I wondered if there was something else at work, something that was more amazing, something that was more preposterous. I began to suspect that, like the women of the book, my mother was telling me I should know this, that this was all acceptable and part of nature and human society, and that it was time I got some information. Sometimes I observed my mom as I pondered this idea. I watched her sew a skirt or highlight pages in her textbooks, a 5-foot-tall, curly-haired utter mystery. I decided I may have underestimated her. She had been banned from Woman Doctor, so that now I would never be banned from anything. I could read blatant smut if I so chose, and I didn't have to hide it. She might even be hurt if I did hide it, as if I had rejected the indulgence and information she had worked so hard to provide. It was a heady realization. So I read and read until even Isla was a little less thrilling, and then I set her back on the bookshelf. Perhaps my newly liberated mother would like to reread the novel too. And once or twice, I did see her reading that familiar book, her posture tense and attentive. I also thought she peered sharply in my direction several times, but I could have been wrong. I spent autumn delving into more young adult work, but eventually I returned to the Mammoth Hunters one more time. My mother and I had never discussed it, and I had never asked her if my theory was correct. It was my belief that she and I had reached an understanding. So I settled in with the pleasant anticipation of a good, hot, sleeping furs scene. I may have poured myself a cold drink. I refused to skip ahead. Instead, I read through every bit of comfrey root and bear fat and cured mammoth skin and drumming and ochre paste until I turned to the most important moment in a 600-page book. The moment on which I knew commenced the longest and most delectable scene of all, a virtuosic 6-page carnal education in passion and reciprocity. My mother had razored the whole thing out. Thank you.